Tomcat fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy, the heroic Carey Lohrenz.
Some of the things that I would like to share with you today are those lessons learned on my journey from a small town Midwestern girl into the cockpit of a $45 million fighter jet. Launched off the front end of that aircraft carrier, going from 0 to over 200 miles an hour in just under 2 seconds flat. NASCAR, please. The last decade, I've worked with outstanding leaders and executives just like yourselves, helping them build high-performing teams and helping take them to the next level of performance. You have to be able to feel the fear and go forward anyway.
Hello and welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us today. This event is to give you a better understanding of the new world of virtual events. Things in the event world, if you've been paying attention at all, are changing and moving very quickly. And so today, this is the theme. The theme for today is moving at the speed of virtual. We've got a great lineup of panelists today who are actually all in studio, although I am physically separated from them. They are physically together, socially distanced and safe, of course, which I think is a great way to show it's possible when you're doing these virtual events to actually do a blend where you have some people in studio together and you have some people that are coming in remotely. So we have time today dedicated to Q&A for both our panelists and our guest speaker. So please feel free to post throughout the event your questions in the Q&A tab, and we will address them during the Q&A portion of our agenda. But before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to kick off the event with a word cloud. On the right side of the stream, you'll see an option to enter Q&A and our poll. So please press poll and enter just one word for this question. What is your biggest concern for virtual events? Now, I know we all have a lot of different ideas, and we're coming to this in the event professional space from different perspectives, whether you are on the production side, maybe a speaker side, or the event management side. So we're probably going to see a lot of different ideas there, and it looks like there are a number of words that are starting to pop up. And things that we're going to be covering today, whether that's cost, what does engagement look like with virtual events? How long does it take to actually swap over from an in-person event to a virtual event? So we're streaming live today via Quickcast from Heroic Production Warehouse here in Bloomington, Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So let's take a second real quick, though, as we're watching these words pop up and meet the panelists. So first up, your first panelist today is going to be Wendy Porter. Wendy is a veteran planner who has worked for many years, both marketing and planning events for some major US corporations before founding her own meeting and events company. Wendy Porter Events was founded in 2015. Now, based in Minneapolis, her company specializes in both live and virtual events, meetings, conferences, trade shows, galas, and serves corporations all over the US and internationally. Wendy has won numerous awards and industry accolades and honors, and when she's not traveling the world for business or pleasure, you'll find her speaking in German on occasion, to the plants in her award-winning garden, or loving on her Australian Shepherd puppy. So next, as we're taking a peek at the word cloud popping up, we've got engagement, coordination, technology, and logistics, which is a great segue to Jon Young. Jon Young may be the only band leader in Minnesota to open a production company. As a music director of the 15-piece R&B band Temporary Heroes, Jon decided early on that this band's 15-year run needed to own its own critical pieces of equipment and to be able to guarantee for his clients a perfect sound and perfect looking show. So digital sound consoles, moving lights, and new speakers became really a small warehouse full of high-end gear. So soon others were asking him to provide production for their meetings, sometimes with the band and sometimes simply supporting their meeting. Heroic Productions was born out of that band over 19 years ago. That small musical start has developed and blossomed into a 22-person nationally recognized AV company. Heroic now serves Fortune 500 companies and meetings and events and clients across the country and across the globe. So next up, we've got John Gorski. Now, if you're curious about how connection, collaboration, and even just the logistics and the technology is going to work behind your virtual event, John Gorski is a person you're probably going to want to have a chat with. With over 10 years plus in the television and broadcast industry, then another 10 in film and video production, this gives John a really interesting perspective and a view of virtual and streaming and this internet technology world. So how do we provide this content? Content supported with technology, and that technological expertise has really propelled John's business, QuickCast, to a favorite virtual meeting partner for many Fortune 500 companies. John's first webcast in 1996 was just the beginning. What follows is a rich history, really delivering firsthand experience and combining those changes and advancements in virtual events, along with a really substantial technology platform to support this endeavor. So now that we've met the panelists, let's move into our technology highlights. For today, we are going to start with Jon Young with Heroic Productions. Hi, John. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thanks, Carey. Thanks for joining us this morning. There isn't a day that has gone by since March 15th when I'm not grateful we actually had the space to create this Warehouse 15 at Heroic. It's now more than 10,000 square feet of safe space, which we transformed into a studio, green room, separate production control rooms, 4 bathrooms, and a small kitchen. It kind of sounds like a nice apartment. Since mid-March, we've hosted more than a dozen programs, some of them small, some huge. Some of them have been completely virtual, where it's just our crew in the control rooms monitoring presenters from around the world, to full-on 3-camera shoots, helping our customers introduce new products. Half of them have been live recordings in front of our new green screen that we bought. Some, like this one, are live broadcasts with in-studio talent and a remote presenter. We're on one of our 3 stages that we can use here at Heroic. We can customize to whatever you need. But all of this technology and this space is really just a bridge that we're building to help our customers continue to tell their stories in this new world.
Yeah, John, I think that's fantastic. And I think it demonstrates your ability and how quickly you have found this need for people to, like you said, to share the story and still show product and celebrate the successes while we're still identifying these opportunities in a really challenging time.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so John, it's great to hear from you. I'd like to take a second, though, to do a quick technology highlight from John Gorski with Implex.
Hi, Carey. Thank you. As you said earlier, the first webcast that I was involved with was in 1996. And when we did that, I thought, wow, this is the coolest thing since sliced bread. Everybody's going to want to do it. Took a long time for the internet to catch up, and YouTube's introduction taught people how easy it is to get video to the web, and things have kind of taken off. For many years, we have had a model where QuickCast just supported live meetings. So we were always the extension of a live meeting to a global audience. And now that with the virus and the changing world, it's the virtual meetings are everything. And so instead of being the tail of the dog, we're kind of running the show too many times. It's sometimes not a real comfortable spot to be in. But Implex, being a technology services company, was founded in early 1990s, so we're really long in the tooth in technology years. But we've grown to a company with 3 divisions. We have a division called Data Ride that takes care of networking. We do wireless networks in the Twin City area here. We support corporate networks in some areas. We also run our own data center. So we control a lot of our transmission entity. We have another division called Digital Edison, which is a web development and website development company. So when we're working on QuickCast and we need special looks and feels, we lean on these people. And then the division I run, QuickCast, has been in the streaming business now since the early 2000s. Our first large customer was 3M. Followed by, we do a lot of work with Ecolab and Medtronic and Ameriprise, and we're very fortunate to be located here in the Twin Cities where we're a Fortune 500 rich environment, and these folks have supported us very nicely. That's kind of what we do.
Yeah, John, that's amazing. And it sounds like you and your team really have been in this virtual world for quite a while now. And I think that what's so helpful about that is that as we are shifting lanes and we're trying to figure out not just how we continue to get together, how we celebrate successes, but people can tend to get so tangled up in the solution instead of just thinking about the delivery. What is it we are trying to achieve? And obviously you and your company have a rich history in providing that solution, which then also is a big piece of the risk management of running event safely, successfully, and gets the kind of engagement, obviously, that both executives and planners and attendees are really hoping for. So I think that's fantastic. So I'd like to take a second really to go ahead and open up the fireside chat. The first question, Wendy, this is going to be for you, and we'll go from there. Wendy, from a planning perspective, there's so many different terms and there's a lot of different language that might be different or unfamiliar to people who are new to this new modality, if you will. So what is the key difference, do you think, between a live and a virtual event?
Well, really, when you think about planning an event, whether it's virtual or live, you really need to start with the foundation and the basics. So it doesn't really matter what platform you're in. You need to start with your objectives and your goals and what are you trying to achieve. And then, obviously, if you're doing a live event, it's more about the stage production and the theatrics as it relates to how you're producing that event on stage. Whereas in a virtual event, it's more about the technology at that point. What platforms are you going to use? What partners are you going to bring into play? What kind of engagement are you going to incorporate into your experience? We know that adults have an attention span of about 7 to 10 minutes. So it's really critical as you're planning a virtual event that you're really thinking through those engagement components to make sure that you're keeping people engaged and you're kind of bringing them back to the content that you're trying to deliver.
No, I think that's really spot on. And, John, you have a lot of experience right now and trying to make that lane shift, if you will, of how do you bring that big event energy, if you will, to a really small screen. As we've talked about in the past, oftentimes now when it comes to virtual events and the people right now who are joining us today, we might be, they might be watching it on a little iPhone, they might be on a laptop, on a big desktop, on their iPad, on a bike. So how do you integrate those different aspects to bring that type of engagement?
Yeah, I think that's the key. And one of the ways that you could turn this question is, what isn't different in virtual world? It still requires massive amounts of planning. And we operate on the 6 Ps. Proper planning prevents pitifully poor performance. And it doesn't stop whether it's virtual or live. Virtual isn't easier and it isn't cheaper. It's a misconception. It's except you don't have to buy the food in the virtual world, and
that's a great consideration. And I'll pop in just for a second.
Yeah.
Having been on the keynote speaking side of it, I do about 100 events a year, so I get to see lots of different production companies and different venues and events. And some of the uneasiness, if you will, is people are making this transition over to virtual. They think, oh, I can't make that spend, or we're not going to have our funds have gone down. We can't charge people the same amount for maybe a trade show fee or a floor fee, or all the different fees that come with it. And yet, if you approach this with a different mindset, there are a lot of things you are no longer paying for. So the investment can now be made in great production, still bringing great speakers in, and planning this event that gets people super fired up still, and not in a place where we just feel like we have to just wait for this to pass, right? We just have to get to the other side of this. Because working together and with teams like what you all have, we're able to bring people to a greater place of possibility, right?
Yep.
So go ahead.
That's what we think too, and it's not the case where it's bad to go from what was live to now virtual. It's just a transition. We're in it. There aren't live events right now. We're trying to make this the very, very best it can be, and discovering that there are lots of really cool things that you can do virtually that you couldn't have done live. And there is also an intentionality to the conversation when you're virtual about what do we want this to look like? How is it going to feel? How do we accomplish that? And what else can we do to enhance this? So it focuses questions, and I love it. I think it's fantastic, but never in a million years did any of us think we were going to be here.
Oh gosh, no.
Two other points I wanted to add to that too. From a planning perspective, I want people to realize also that it takes about 2 times the amount of time to plan a virtual event as compared to a live event. I think a lot of folks misunderstand that, or they think, oh, we can stand this up in 2 weeks, or, no. If you've got a 4-month lead time that you're planning for your live event, you need to be planning for at least that, if not more, for a virtual in order to get the right kind of engagement and components built out. The other thing I wanted to mention is around the audience. It does, virtual helps you extend your audience, right? So in a live situation, maybe you can have 500 people attend your event. Well, virtually, the sky's the limit. You could have as many people as you want to, especially if you're using a broadcast technology like Implex. You can have, hundreds of thousands of people on that event if you want to. So that's the beauty, I think, of virtual, is it does extend your audience.
Absolutely. And I think this is where, and we've had this discussion before, this is where, finding those people who've walked the path, even if it's just a couple of months before you, have done this successfully, and partnering with the people who can make that piece of it easier with de-risking part of it. But I will share with you, Wendy, one of the things I found with even some of the clients that I've worked with, I actually have worked with a couple of clients that have flipped very big, what were supposed to be in-person events, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people, and inside of a 5-week period moved from changing it from in-person to online. And it was fabulous. However, the critical piece in that is, I think, everybody going into this with the mindset and being vulnerable enough, which is kind of a scary word for a lot of people, to go, I don't know what I'm doing. This is different than what I've done before. Who knows what they're doing? And not being afraid to ask for that help from partners who can illuminate that path. And part of this even is figuring out what is the terminology we're using, and maybe building the event backwards, saying this is still what we want to achieve, but then understanding that in the production side and the professional event planning space, words matter when we're trying to make the ask. So for example, the difference between what is a webinar and a webcast, right? And I would ask people, here we go. What's the difference? We have 14% saying it's program length. Other people think it's an interactivity difference. Wendy, what would you say is the difference between a webinar and a webcast?
So in my mind, and I think you're right on that people are confused about these terms. A webinar is more of a training type of function. It's more of a one-to-one interaction. It's more like a Zoom call, which we're used to seeing, whereas a webcast is more like this scenario where we are broadcasting out potentially to a very large audience. The process behind the scenes is different in a webcast versus a webinar as far as how we're managing the technology. And a webcast is typically a much higher quality experience, a higher quality signal. You can integrate your brand much better. So those are really the two differences. And I'm seeing on the poll here, audience size is actually not coming up as an answer. And that's interesting because typically a webinar is a smaller audience and a webcast is a larger audience. So it's my feedback.
Right.
On that
Well,
one.
and this is where it goes to really opening up the channels of communication within the industry and even with the clients, so that we start off, being open, being transparent, and not getting too hung up on words, and finding those partners that maybe you've got somebody on the team who's great at bringing everybody together, and they know they have the vision, but the words are a little bit mushy. Right? Or you're thinking we need to do a webinar. You don't understand. I've been on a webinar, but you on your professional side already know, okay, that's actually a webcast or a live stream that they're thinking.
Mhm.
And so we have to integrate those tools. So John, when you think from a production standpoint, what are the foundational elements that if somebody's trying to get their mind or their arms around right now, holy cow, we've got a live event that's supposed to go in September and October, and we don't really know what we're going to do. We have a really short runway. What are the things that we should be considering from a production standpoint to effectively leverage a virtual platform?
Well, I'll jump
Yeah, you
first.
start.
I think the questions that we would ask is, what do you want it to look like? And that's the biggest one. Is this fancy? Is it not fancy? Is it high tech, low tech? Is it interactive? Where are the presenters going to be? How many are they going to be? Do you want to be able to interact in real time with them? That will always determine the platform. And we are always focused on how can we remove as many barriers to doing this well as possible. And for an example is we now own 45 studio kits that we send out, that we don't send them all out at the same time, to speakers who are going to be remote, so that we can guarantee that their look and their sound is at the level that would be what everyone would expect. It has a really good camera in it, a computer, and headphones, so that we can take out the variables of somebody's home studio or the corporate office where the firewall won't let you get through to get back to our system. So we remove those barriers, and that's been fantastic to try to just take it away to keep the level high.
That's awesome. John, what are you seeing our clients' concerns now as we're moving forward in rapidly trying to adapt to this?
People will ask me questions about this often, and part of I was just on a call this morning with a client, and they kept referring to things you can do in Zoom versus what you can do in QuickCast, so I'm always in a situation where like, how do you really distinguish the difference between the two? And I was thinking about this, and I have a tendency to forget things on a regular basis. So I thought, well, I'll remember my 4 points coming up with an acronym, and which is when I came up with the C to Shining Seas deal. I think that in a corporate environment, in a secure communication piece, the important things are security, the environment you can present the webcast in or the program in, the accessibility, and then how you see statistics, which lots of times with all these other tools like Zoom and Teams, these are not so easy to get. Under security, to think about items, especially in the corporate world, they're looking at LDAP security, single sign-on, unique users, digital rights management, allowing people in or out, these are all things that are really difficult to do in these other tools. Being able to control registration. The fact that QuickCast is a total HTTPS or total encrypted platform and path from the webcast, the website, to the video window, everything's encrypted, so it's a lot more secure. And then you look at environment. We preach a lot that you know, you're going to spend a lot of money creating this event. Make sure it reflects your brand. You know, you do a Zoom call and you've got Hollywood Squares. You do a QuickCast call and you've got the corporate branding, the corporate message. You can include tools like related documents that you want to distribute to everybody at the same time. You can do engagement things like the polling and do Q&A or moderated Q&A. You can also do things like certification, continuing education credits, because we can monitor how long people actually view a program. But you can view the program and then put up a test to find out whether or not people really paid attention. Accessibility. There's no download with QuickCast. QuickCast is available on any platform, be it a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone, without anything other than a browser. There's no applet, there's nothing to download. Lots of times you get into a corporate environment where the corporate firewalls on their computers won't allow you to download anything. But it's the QuickCast platform is available on all corporate networks and home networks. And having said, and then the other thing, you know, people always ask, we did a run of programs that were just great for, it was a church that during Holy Week, when everything closed down, and they're like, oh my, you know, their parishioners were clamoring, people wanted to see it. And we streamed all of their Holy Week services. There were over 30,000 people that came to watch the different services. They streamed it on our platform and they streamed it on Facebook. You'd go look at Facebook and you'd go, were there 20 people there? Were 100 people? You don't really know. But with our statistics package, you get to see how long people watch, where they were, what device they were watching on, which helps you plan for future events to make sure if a lot of your people are watching on mobile devices, you have to design for that. And then feedback on the networks and the content distribution networks that people are watching programs on, because it can change. And I was going to finish with just showing this morass of designs. Just about all platforms, be it a Zoom, a WebEx, a Teams call, will go through a lot of these steps. But when you're in the QuickCast environment, we own all of this infrastructure. We own it, we control it, the network guys monitor it, watch it. If something fails, we'll fix it quickly. Something fails on a Teams broadcast, a Zoom broadcast, a WebEx broadcast, good luck trying to figure out where you're gonna go to fix it. So those items, and I'm not saying you know, we encourage people, you're having a meeting with 10 people, do a Zoom call, do a Teams call. You're gonna have a meeting with 100 people to 10,000 people, and you wanna get tight statistics, you've gotta use a tool similar to a QuickCast tool. It's my story and I'm kind of sticking to it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And a couple of the takeaways even that I get from that, and having done a wide variety of different types of virtual events on different platforms, when I think about some of the desired takeaways when we're getting together for those in-person events, particularly when you're working with safety professionals or financial advisors, credit unions, people who need, or in the IT field, on site, they are getting those different levels of certification. The fact that your platform can also track that and aggregate that information so that people are also being able to earn certification levels, certificates, whatever that may be, I think is amazing, and something to be really thoughtful about when you're considering making that investment, all of the different takeaways or those end results that you're going to be able to drive. The other question I would actually have for you as well, though, John Gorski, is around security. Can you talk just a little bit more about security? Because again, if I'm thinking about some people who with different events at these events, they're talking about some proprietary information, right? They've got some big moves coming, or from an industry perspective, they have to have a real tight level of control of who has access. So could you talk about security for just a second?
Sure, sure. In my file cabinet at the office, probably the thickest folder is the NDA folder. As you could well imagine, the way the system is designed, it is one platform, but we've got silos of information inside that platform, and there are all sorts of international certification tools. The recent one that people see most often is called a SOC 2 or SOC 2, that has a security certification that people like Ameriprise and Medtronic and Ecolab ask us to fill these things out on a regular basis. Much like our data center it's a tier 1 data class center now. We're actually one of about 618 data centers in the world. And if you think, there's probably tens of thousands of data centers in the world. We are one of 618 data centers in the world that is on a kind of a high-level class. We're on the same class with the SpaceX folks as far as how we deal with security. And we know this because we're in conversations with these folks about some other things. But to get to that level of certification is why we've got this group of people in our data ride place that they read and go through documentation that I'm just very happy I don't have to.
Well, I don't want to tell you how to run your business here, and I'm not a marketing professional, but you may have buried the security lead there, that if you are secure enough to be working with SpaceX, then that's probably a pretty good thing. Your virtual event or my virtual event would probably be in good hands going with you. So again, I'm not a marketing professional, and I did not sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So, buyer beware on that. But I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Jon Young, I know with Heroic, when we're talking about how we uphold a company's brand standard and what that deliverable looks like, that overall quality and visibility and alignment with brand and storytelling. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you help organizations and companies achieve that?
Yeah, thank you. It's the most important thing to a company or an organization. They spend years building up their brand, and sadly, in minutes, it can be torn apart if it's not handled with care. We always begin with questions when somebody comes to us to talk about a virtual event, the same way we would with a live event. What do you want to accomplish? What do you want it to look like? What is the fit and finish on this particular show that you're doing? That drives all of the questions on how we solve the situation. And it's the answers to those questions that determine how the audience feels about the company or the organization when they leave this particular event. That's their brand, it's their culture. I've been thinking about an example that I might use, and I keep coming back to the Nobel Conference, which is at Gustavus Adolphus College every October. This year, it's the 6th and 7th of October. It's the 49th annual conference. We've been broadcasting it for them for the last 10 years. 4,000 people come to this. It's 6 or 7 international speakers, sometimes Nobel laureates. It's a huge live event on campus, which will not take place live this year. It's going to be virtually broadcast, actually, from here at Heroic. As we've talked about this, the driving force of all of this is the same thing that's the difference on the webinar and webcast reactions here. It's all about interactivity. one of the things that makes the Nobel Conference unique is this incredible interactivity between speakers and the audience, and speakers and each other. So each speaker will give a talk over the 2 days, and then all of the speakers come back up for conversation with each other. And it's fascinating, sometimes scarily, intensely smart people talking to each other. And they want to maintain that. But I was talking to my colleague down at Gustavus this morning on an event, or a part of the Nobel, and she said, you know, we've been talking about taking small steps for the last 5 years on how do we create more engagement and more interactivity. And she said, I wasn't sure that this is the way it was going to turn out, but now we get a chance to test this out, and because it's only going to be interactive. But that's the driving force. How do we tell our story, keep it interactive, and not disrupt the brand, enhance it as we go?
Yeah, and I think that's amazing, and that is such a great example of that. And Wendy, we'll talk to you about engagement in just a second. But John, for you, that production quality level, and I think from an execution perspective, again, when people, let's think about even this fall, are thinking, how fast can I pivot? Can we move this? Maybe our resources are cut back, or are people going to not necessarily be engaged? But when you put a thoughtful package together, my experience has been, and I'd be interested to hear yours as well, that engagement levels actually go through the roof when it's well done and there's access available. Because I know if I'm doing a keynote in front of 5,000 people on stage, generally speaking, there's not going to be much chance for Q&A, because how are 4,000 people going to raise their hand, right? But if you're doing engagement and you want to have a great conversation around this community, you actually have much more access to the people who are talking, with Q&A, with the interactive, whether it's polls or querying with surveys. That real time you can get feedback and perspectives that previous to this, you just didn't have that level of access.
Yeah, it's going to be very fun to see how this goes. We didn't just start this morning talking about doing this virtually, of course, but it will be really fun to see how this turns out. We'll talk again on October 10th.
Yeah, right. After you've taken a couple of naps, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I know it'll be amazing. I can't wait. I can't wait to follow it. Probably on my phone.
We'll send you a link.
But
Yeah.
Wendy, what would you add to this? I know you're really big on engagement and trying to put together a thoughtful experience, an attendee experience. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, so it's all the tools that you mentioned, making sure you're leveraging the technology. So the polls, the surveys, the word clouds, the Q&A, all of that. But then additionally, there are some really interesting and innovative companies that are starting to kind of stand up here in the last couple of months, and we're seeing all kinds of fun virtual experiences happening. So, for example, you could do a virtual wine tasting experience. Right now you can't do that cocktail hour anymore. So there are vendors out there now that are working with local hospitality companies that will deliver all the mixers and all the ingredients for that cocktail. You'll get a mixologist on the virtual event. He'll explain how to make that cocktail, and you all do it together and then have a little virtual happy hour, So we're seeing things like that. We're seeing that with cooking. We're seeing wine and cheese tasting experiences, trivia contests, things like, scavenger hunts where they're asking you to run around your house and find stuff and engage with your kids and your dog because they're right there too, right? So bringing all those things to kind of amp up the engagement and the fun level of being online, we're starting to see all those things kind of come together.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I call it now instead of trying to figure out how you are going to get your swag bag stuff from the event, your squish balls or t-shirts or whatever back rolled up tight into your suitcase, a lot of clients now are delivering it ahead of time. So all of a sudden you'll show up and everyone's in t-shirts, or they have their trucker hats on, or water bottles, or whatever the case may be, or maybe a coffee mug, which then still builds that connection. And again, we're able to interact in real time, which I think is a super thoughtful way to be having these virtual events and bringing that otherness, those other really positive qualities that maybe 5 months ago we hadn't really thought about.
Yep,
So
that's
sometimes
exactly right.
sometimes when people are then thinking about, and again, this is where things from the idea, the start, maybe you have a date, where things get muddled up is the execution. And this is actually from my perspective where I see either people who are just going, hey, we're going for it, we're going to make it work, or people being paralyzed by that fear and stuck because it's a different skill set than what they've been doing maybe for the last 10 or 20 years. And it's actually scary because they don't want to be the one to have an event kind of fall apart on their watch. So can you all share a couple of ideas or things about how important it is to actually find that right partner? In essence, is kind of like event insurance, if you will.
Yeah, I think that is huge. You have to have the right partner. You can't know everything, and that's okay. You don't have to know everything, but you have to have the relationships that you can call upon the right people to help you get that whole program put together properly. For me, I participate in a lot of Facebook groups and different industry groups, and I'm learning from my colleagues every day. People are posting new ideas like, hey, we just did this in a virtual event, and I'll take that back and, implement that idea. So I think it's really critical that everybody's talking to each other, sharing best practices, sharing best ideas, and really bringing in those partners that have that expertise.
Yes. I love that. And that idea of collaboration right now, I think is more important than it ever has been before. Collaboration, communicating and sharing your lessons learned, what's working, what's not, so that the industry as a whole can get right. I don't want to say back on track because that implies we're going back to normal. And I'm not sure we're going to go back to where we were in, say, February. I think it's going to be hybrid for quite a long time. So Jon Young, what would you have to share about that?
I echo her comments exactly. I think that this whole COVID time has been an incredible equalizer for our industry. And we will be better in the future by working together now. And there's room for competition, I suppose, but right now we need cooperation and to be kind to each other, and there's a real self-effacing moment when you come to the realization, like Wendy said, you don't know everything because this is a new space. Yes, we use cameras. Yes, we use lights. We're sitting on a stage. We own all this stuff, but this isn't how we used to use it. And so everybody is learning. Everybody is trying to do the very best they can. And there is great room for being kind to each other right now.
Empathy and humility right now. Better
be your two words. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And grace, right? Because we're all going to get Zoom bombed at some point. Somebody's dog's going to come in, somebody's kid's going to come in, somebody's feed is going to go down. But from the partnering perspective, obviously we're all in the business of as well de-risking having those things happen, right? I always joke with people and at in-person events, always show up super early for the AV checks and the tech checks. And I'm just like, hey, my job here is to not screw it up. My job is to make you look like a rock star. Right. But John Gorski, from that event insurance perspective or being a great partner, what are you seeing and how are you seeing even that dynamic maybe even change a little bit?
It's, on one hand, it's the same as it's always been, but it's probably heightened. I'm very fortunate to sit here and tell you that it's difficult for me to think back on an event that we did that didn't work, where something happened. I mean, it's amazing, and that's not me. That's my engineer that's encoding this thing for us right now. It's the network team back at the office. Those are all really. Everything we do has two paths. There's separate networking, there's separate encoding, there's separate distribution areas. The distribution team, it's not a cluster of video servers. It's a big cluster of video servers that are elastic and kind of move around in how they're used. But when you were talking about that, I was thinking, we did an event for our 3M client where we did a live broadcast from Germany. And the CEO was going to make an address over there, and we actually sent our engineer along with him. And my 3M client said to me, this absolutely, positively cannot fail. It has to work, right? And I looked at him and I said, you know, we do everything we possibly can, and our record is incredible, but we do everything we possibly can. But then again, the lights will never go out at the Super Bowl. Okay, it's a technology. Things could happen. You know, there isn't 100% guarantee. That's why contracts have force majeure in them. But if you're, you know, we've been at this game long enough that our technology tools are actually really deep. And having said that, I will also tell you that the way we produce and the way we stream and the way we distribute an event today is different than it was 6 months ago. I mean, that's how quickly the technology is changing. So you've got that, you have that redundancy, and you have a lot of things that you need to do to protect that stream. But oh my goodness, it's changing very quickly.
Right.
Which keeps it fun for us.
Yeah, I would say it's safe to say that there's almost a bit of an analogy that we're all trying to finish building this airplane rolling down the runway, right?
Yeah.
We know we're going to get airborne, but it's strap in. It could be a bumpy ride on occasion, but when you have that great partner and people who are going down this path a little bit ahead of you with a successful track record, definitely helpful. So I think this has been a really great discussion. So I thank you all so much for your insights on those few topics, and we're going to come back to that. But I want to move over for a second to hop over to our drop-in guest speaker, Isaac Rothwell. So Isaac started his career in media production about 20 years ago or so. And after having many years spent in the studio and doing video production as a recording studio owner and an operator, he transitioned into the technology production side of the live events industry. So for the past 8 years, Isaac has really worked in various roles in national audio and video production. And on different teams, he's advanced and now serves as a national director of operations for Digirad. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I think I am, Productions. And he's a partner there. So he oversees really the national operations for the company and is leading a team right now of regional operations in Raleigh, Orlando, Phoenix, and Chicago. So pretty much across the country. Isaac has a passion for innovation in both the operations and improving the technology to deliver live events, with a company focus, though, on corporate events, on business meetings, on trade shows, and conferences. So perfect for our discussion today. So following the president's really initial address to the nation on March 11th, Isaac had to have really had this gut reaction and realized there was a need to bring attention to what has been grave financial impact from COVID-19 on not only the economy, but the events and the live events industry. And following that overwhelming response to a petition Isaac wrote and launched on change.org, he began to organize calls to collaborate with other event industry professionals, which I love. So they're contacting him both with gratitude and seeking further action on how do we step beyond this petition? How do we get these conference calls, these ideas, and realize the need for live events? And so he formed the Live Event Coalition. So Isaac continues to lead this coalition with both intense dedication and focus, and is driving more professionals and businesses and organizations to drive this coalition. So Isaac, we are so grateful to have you on board today. I know you have a number of updates, fast moving times between March 11th and today. feels like a lifetime and then also feels like just yesterday. So go ahead, why don't you take it from here and share with us what you're up to and what you're seeing.
Absolutely. Thanks for the great intro, Carey. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of recapped a lot of it. We started a petition way back in March, and it just kind of went viral throughout the industry and had all these people behind the scenes calling us, how congratulating, but what more can we do? And quickly we had, a group of people that kind of came up with the concept of making this live events coalition. We didn't know exactly, what it would become, but we knew we needed to kind of create this voice. And one of the key driving factors was a group in DC that had formed the DC Events Coalition, and they kind of helped spearhead that idea. But they had a lot of connection with the politicians in Washington, so we quickly knew we could take this petition and try to start speaking with federal legislation. So in the beginning, we always had this focus on trying to lobby and make sure our voices are going to be heard in these bailout packages that were starting to happen. So that's kind of where we got birthed out of. We've kind of put together an ad hoc board to come up with the mission. And our vision is just really, we knew that COVID-19 had devastating impacts on the live events industry. All of us, in the beginning of March, just saw our calendars starting to empty. And we needed to find a way to communicate to that with our lawmakers. And I mean, the amazing thing is all the calls were just coming from such a wide array of people behind the scenes of events. And you really, until that moment, you kind of are, we all work together, but we're in our bubble, and we're so hyper focused on what we do in live events. But really what hit home for us is that how deep the ecosystem of live events goes down to actually, we were having calls with people who were talking about florists who were talking about how their farmers were not able to actually produce flowers. And so you just forget how deep it goes and who all's impacted. All the vendors at state fairs, and these people just were looking for someone to come together and try to create this unified voice. So we created this really broad mission statement that we advocate and support the many voices that make up the live events industry. We are hospitality planners, caterers, talents, musicians, producers, technicians, general contractors, engineers, suppliers, manufacturers, and so much more. And I would just put a emphasis on the so much more, because that's what we found through this whole process, is that we forget how widespread live events are. And so our two immediate goals are to leverage the power of our networks to provide care, support, resources for the community that makes up the live events industry, and to call attention to the catastrophic effects of COVID-19 on the business of live events, and ensure that we're included in ongoing national conversations and supplemental federal aid packages. So that's been kind of what we've been doing since March. We've formed as a 501c6, so it allows us to actually do lobbying towards legislation. Early on, we were able to have conversations with various lobbyists and government relations firms. We selected a firm called Subject Matter because they were a creative advocacy firm. And they also not only did kind of the government relations side, but they also did the political communication side of it. And we really liked that creative advocacy side of it, because we knew we didn't need to just communicate with our lawmakers what our needs were, but we also needed to get national attention and media and the average person. I mean, so many of us know it's how hard it is to explain to our family members what our industry really is and really what we do for a living. But we also realize that, this is something that, like some of the major economic impacts, this isn't something that's just kind of, our industry just isn't in these major markets. It's in all 50 states, because we start thinking about weddings, all these other local events, rodeos, and we really started to learn about how much even live events drives rural economies. And so some of these things along the way, working to find out kind of how our impact and what we're communicating to lawmakers, is some of the key findings we found in all this was that, our industry provides over nearly 12 million jobs nationwide. We contribute, roughly to $1 trillion to the U.S. economy. And that's kind of a conservative. If you really go deeper and look at all kind of the ancillary spending around live events, we can probably even go much higher. And that's one area we see we're pushing for. There isn't actually a lot of good data out there when you really look at live events globally, in the U.S. When you're looking at kind of what is the economic impact. It's been about 6 years since there was a major study that just really looked at the corporate events and trade show side. but that's one area. So it's been hard to kind of find that. But I think one thing that will come out of this, and one silver lining, is as we know what live events truly is, I think we'll have um, a better understanding of what our economic impact is in this nation going forward, and will help us in our advocacy future. Um, so, I mean, there's some other things, we quickly found out, 90% of events have been canceled or moved to virtual, but actually the live in-person aspect of it for the year, most everything has been canceled. And so these are the things we really have been working to communicate with our lawmakers. Along the way, we've also kind of brought in some very key partners in doing a lot of interviews and kind of getting a lot of industry press. We were able to speak with and get connections with some very large organization alignments, like International Association of Exhibitors and Events, and plugging in with Meetings Means Business and U.S. Travel. And these are partners that we kind of worked with to kind of align. And we kind of, as we found our footing, we found that we were looked to as being this voice of kind of the front lines of the industry and the grassroots nature of our movement, and that we were able to really engage the workers and the very small businesses that didn't have seats at the table already at Meetings Means Business and some of these other organizations. We also found an ally in NEVA, which maybe some of you have heard and seen, that their Save Our Stages campaign. So as we formed and actually were able to do, I mentioned the DC Events Coalition, they were very instrumental in the beginning of this, of doing fundraising within their people to get the ball rolling, with actually for us to engage an official government relations firm under contract, and did a lot of the fundraising. So when we engaged that firm, we were actually able to get them in touch with the U.S. Travel government relations leaders, and also NEVA, so that we actually created a kind of government relations team that coordinated across some of these other people out there. So we made sure we were all working together towards the same goals, and we all were sharing and working together, and the information of what we were doing as far as how we were trying to lobby the lawmakers to make sure we were all on the same page. So, I mean, it's been a whirlwind, and I mean, I could go on and on about all the things behind the scenes, but some of the other, let me see here, I got to get my slide to advance. One of the other big things we saw about the end of June is we quickly realized, we weren't the only, why we kind of brought together a lot of people through the petition and the DC Events Coalition. We started to see, like, the Illinois Events Coalition kind of be inspired by the DC Events Coalition. And then we saw some other coalitions, and then so we got introduced to other coalitions that in other states that actually formed way back in March. And so what we did as the Live Events Coalition, we started to try to create this umbrella for all the different states to come together, share information, and really work together. So as you see on the slide, we have the California Events Coalition, Colorado, DC, Illinois, Oregon, Minnesota, New York, New Jersey, Texas, Utah, and Washington. There's more than this. These are the ones that actually just are able to actually have their logos and websites. We actually have between 24 to 26, and we're actually having people step forward on a weekly basis to start a new coalition. So we're always looking for people to join or found coalitions in their states. Our goal, obviously, at the end of this is to have a state coalition in every state. So,
well, Isaac, I know you've been super busy doing this, and I have to say I am beyond grateful for your advocacy. I know it's a really heavy lift, no doubt. And what I'd like to do, if you're okay with this, is kind of open up the panel, the Q&A panel, for just a second, because I'm sure there are going to be some people who are definitely going to have some questions for you. So we'll give it just a second here for that to pop up. But it's interesting. I think you're so spot on. And obviously I've followed it as well. It's, my business has been profoundly impacted, and the depths of I don't want to say despair, but for a lot of people, there was such a transformation between what happened in 2008, 2009, even in the events industry companies. So you have a lot more people that are independent contractors or are smaller shops that may not be working under big umbrellas. So that when something like this level of devastation happens, they don't have a company that's advocating for them. They don't have somebody who's, something to fall back on. They're an independent contractor who is highly skilled, and trying to, when we get this back up on speed, whether we're trying to do a group of 100 people at the Gaylord Grand Harbor, or at the Manchester Grand in San Diego, or Salt Lake City, right? Convention center with 25,000 people, or we just want to go to an outdoor Foo Fighters concert. There's that whole ecosystem. We can't leave people unsupported and unattended, because that skill set will go away, because they're going to have to find something else. So if we don't advocate for it, this is my take on this, why it is such a broader discussion, and that it's such a grand ecosystem that does affect everybody across the country, and obviously globally as well. So let me take a look here at some of the questions. Production quality demonstrated. Okay, I'm not actually seeing, it's kind of moving. I'm not seeing any questions for you right out of the gate. Probably because you're really well prepared. So if, I guess the question I would have for you real quick, as we have to kind of wrap up here with you, is how can people reach out to you if they want to establish a coalition in their state? Where can they find you?
I mean, the best way to get in touch with us is through our website, liveeventscoalition.org, and just using the contact form, it'll filter through to who it needs to go to. That's the best way. And then you can find out a lot more about our organization. We did launch membership a couple weeks ago, so we are signing up individual members and also business members and partners at different sponsorship and commitment levels. But I mean, the main thing is we know this isn't a short fight. We need to continue our fundraising to have official government relations firm representing us. We know, the next stimulus package we're working on, that hopefully we've been very pushing that hopefully will get us through the end of the year. But after that, we're going to need to go back to Congress and talk with them some more. So that is
what would be the short answer then, Isaac? So what does success look like for the coalition for you? What
success looks like getting that safety net for the entire industry, be it the small businesses, even our large business partners, but especially, like you mentioned, the freelancers and the labor, just to survive this. We don't want to see people have to leave our industry because of this. We just want to make it through. We won't be made whole, but we all want to survive. And our goal is to help everyone survive.
Right. And I think you did a great job. It's, again, I can't thank you enough for your advocacy, because I've been in so many conversations, even just on that production side, and it has literally hit every single level, whether it's, audio professionals, creatives, it's just, hotel, F&B, just everything. It's been devastating. And I think for many, it feels invisible because they don't see where they fit in, whether it's the Paycheck Protection Program or, how are they going to manage? And we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know the path it's going to take, and we still can't predict the outcome. So what can we control right now? And I think that what you're doing right now with this Live Events Coalition is such profound work and is going to impact so many people in this industry. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to share with us today what it is that you all are trying to accomplish as well. I'm grateful.
Well, thank you very much. And shout out to Wendy Porter, who's leading our Minnesota coalition too. So for all you people in Minnesota, reach out to Wendy and help join her in her efforts.
Yeah, Wendy's doing all the things right now, right? This is when we have to have all those skills and talents are going to be aggregated in a different way to make a bigger impact. So thanks so much, Isaac, for joining us. I really appreciate it. We're going to go back now to the panel for a little bit of Q&A. So I'm going to take a peek. Panel, be ready. We have some questions coming towards you. Joe, what kind, and I'm going to think that this is for Joe of Heroic. What kind of lead time, actually, both of you, what kind of lead time right now are you seeing with virtual meeting requests?
From a production standpoint?
From a production standpoint, it's all over the map. We got a call last week from somebody who wanted to know if we could put together a quote for an event they couldn't describe that was going to happen in 10 days. And And that's true.
Why should that surprise you?
But that's just, it's not dissimilar to the live world. It's just, it's a new world. It's a new vocabulary. Everyone's trying to figure this out. So there isn't an answer, there isn't a specific answer to your question on what is the lead time. Those who have the great opportunity to look ahead have months to plan. Some who are still reacting to the news that their event has to be changed, they don't have that luxury, and so you try to work with all points in between.
Right. So you're almost production professionals / event therapists.
We are truly. I believe that we are becoming psychologists and therapists in a certain part of our role, and that's okay. But that isn't what we were trained to do. But you used the word empathy before. You require great helpings of empathy right now, and kindness to recognize that we're all in this boat. None of us chose this. We can survive this, and we will be better for it. But it isn't going to change overnight, and it's going to be different whenever whatever it is over. So you can choose to be angry and frustrated in the process, or you can say, I'm going to be hopeful, and I'm going to look ahead, and we're going to try to figure this out, and I'm going to surround myself with people I trust, and see if we can make something special for this.
Well, and I think it's also fair to say it's similar to almost a grief process on occasion, right? And even within a conversation about how you're going to move that event forward, the frustration and the unknown, and I think it's important for all of us to acknowledge that there is some of that fear still. There is some, people who have been in the industry for a long time not wanting to look like they may not necessarily have the answer when they've been the person who's been the one giving the answers for so long. So if we could think about from an audience perspective right now, if there's one solid takeaway from each of you that you would really love to be able to share with across the board industry wise, what would that be? Wendy, let's start with you on that.
Yeah, I think it gets back to what we said earlier, which is really leveraging your trusted partners. Again, you don't need to know everything. You can't know everything. Producing a virtual event and even a live event is extremely complex. And so you want to make sure you're bringing in the right partners and your trusted allies to make sure everything gets done properly.
I love that.
I would echo our comments before. We don't want to overuse this word, but empathy is the key right now. Be kind to each other and to your team and to your customers, and try to figure this out. Ask a lot of questions and do a lot of serious listening to what the answers are. So,
right. I was just going to say that it has caught me by surprise. I mean, we are in a business that was custom made for a pandemic, and QuickCast is very fortunate to work with quite a few Fortune 500 companies who have been with us for many years. And it's so easy when the finance people call us and say, we've got an event next week, Thursday. Everybody already knows how that looks. We have the templates built. We have all of the pieces built. We know who the contact is at the company, who's going to be on site. It makes it really simple. And the eye-opening thing for me in the last couple of weeks has been the realization that onboarding new customers is really painful. It takes a long time to let people give them, all of the pieces that they need to pay attention to and what they need to really create an event. But it has also taught us something. I was talking to a brand new customer just the other day, and they were asking for things, and I giggled because I said, what you're asking for is fair. I'm just amazed we've never made this document that says this, because we were so used to dealing with people that were repeat business. And now it's like, it's like, well, duh, we should have created, kind of a little better educational tools about what we're using. So it's forcing us to make all of those things, which is, it will make, like John says, it will make all of us so much better. And we're just very hopeful, one, that we don't lose the business that we've been working with. And now the new companies that are coming to work with us, hopefully we'll be able to hold on to them and continue to extend their meetings to a virtual global audience.
Well, John, I think what you even shared there a little bit, and this might be my perspective, but I think, you being even vulnerable enough to share that, hey, we've never had to do it this way before. And your expectation that somebody coming to you already has some level of baseline knowledge because you've been in this industry for so long, that is being able to reframe that really quickly and saying, okay, what's the collateral that we need? And this is for everybody within the industry. If we're going to be able to do this and repeat it, right? Because we don't want to leave success to chance. What is that process? What is that checklist so that things that are intuitive to you, because you've been in this virtual side for so long, don't make somebody else feel bad about asking, or they didn't even know that was the question that they were supposed to ask, right? So how do you collateralize that information so that people can take a look at, essentially, I hate to call it a menu, but the services and the ideas so that they can contextualize and say, here's the possibility, right? We can still have a really successful event. So John Gorski, there was a question for you that says, what does what's Implex's recommended one-to-one streaming platform aside from Zoom? And are there any that are more secure than others?
Interesting question.
I know.
And something that we don't get involved in, but when people, because we do get involved in situations where these executives now want us to record their presentations, and they will say, well, which tool do you like best? WebEx, Teams, Zoom, Hangouts, FaceTime? And our answer generally is always, which is the platform that you're most familiar with? Because whatever the customer is most familiar with, we will bring in, and knowing that it's like I have friends call me or send me emails, and they'll say, I was watching this thing on Zoom the other day of Keith Urban doing some music, and why is it that he looks so good and sounds so good? and I'll say, well, you didn't think for a moment that he was actually using the camera on his computer, and he was using the microphone that's buried behind the keypad. There's outboard gear that John employs, or we employ when somebody calls us. The way we capture that signal, the way we packetize all of those video pieces is at a different level. And you really kind of need to have those tools to make these pieces work. Okay, so that's the quality side of it. As far as security goes, if you are if your corporation is a WebEx corporation, you probably have a WebEx corporate account, which the only way somebody from the outside world can come in to see that is if they get invited. So that becomes very secure. Much the same as with a Microsoft Teams account. If you're an Office 365 group and you sign into your circle, your little network, then that's where it's going to stay. If you start inviting people outside, then they can come in.
Right. Well, so the short answer for the non-technologist layperson would then be, when they ask the question, it depends, right?
Yeah,
because I think Keith started even doing his stuff live streaming on Instagram Live. And after he started, that whole community expanded, then all of a sudden, it's lighting, great mics and all of that. So the experience has changed a little bit, but he also always still has his phone and he's always on Instagram Live. So it does depend. but that's where, again, you go back to the trusted partnership and the people who you've put together all different types of events for quite some time are able to thread that needle much, much quicker than if you were trying to do it by yourself. So Jon Young, with Heroic, that would be my question for you. If you could give a couple of examples, and even with your stage setup, what you have done with different clients with their different needs and how quickly you've moved from a different visual presentation and what's possible with you at Heroic.
I would immediately come back to, so on March 15th, when all of this dropped out from under us, we met on a Tuesday with our company meeting, and I said, here's the situation, here's what it's going to look like. And by that Friday, we had taken this space and turned it into a TV studio. And we're not the only ones who have done that. I don't want to imply that. But we moved very quickly to realize that I had a fun conversation with a person. They said, well, we're not going to do that because we're in the live events business. We're not in the television broadcast business. I said, you do realize that that doesn't exist anymore. And, so you are going to have to do something. And none of us ever believed that it would take this long and that we would still be in this process. But I think that it's, every one of our customers are different, and our NDA file is just as thick as John's. We do a lot of work for our customers where they're looking for something different. They're rolling out a new product. We've done several of those in the last 5 months that will get rolled out at someone else's timetable. But we're a piece of the process where they come in and use a studio where our place is safe. We are learning more and more how important that is. It's safe. You can come here quietly and somewhat anonymously. Private entrance, private everything, and our team can do the shooting side of it and be that piece of it. That's an important part of what we do, and I'm really proud of that we've been able to respond to the needs of our customers who still have to tell their story, still want to roll out products, still want to be present. Now we've discovered this new way to do it.
That's right. And that's what I love about, even as we've, full disclosure, we've talked a little bit, and one of your magnificent gals on your team, Chris Young, about your ability to really advocate for and still guide your clients on this path so that you take away the frustration or the barriers to successful delivery. And that instead of them getting so tangled up on what is the solution, you have the solution that then allows them to deliver a super high-end quality product so that they continue to be able to make an impact, whether that's in the medical field or food services, pharma, whatever they may be. So that's critical, I think, as well. And I appreciate you and your team really going all in on that because it's a scary transition, no doubt. Wendy, do you have one quick example before we wrap up? We only have about a minute left on what you and your team have been able to do as well.
Yeah, so I actually have a client right now that was planning to do a live customer user conference experience later this year. And they're in the medical industry, so they were obviously very keen on what was going on in this COVID situation and understanding that a live event was just not going to be possible. And it was still really important that we had this customer user conference. So in fact, I came to John's team and said, okay, here we are. We've got this customer user conference. We need to figure out how to do this virtually. What can we put together? And it took us a while. We had really a couple of months, I would say, because this was right at the beginning. This was, back in March. A couple of months of really sorting through what were going to be the right platforms to bring together so that we can execute on this, because it's a very complex program. We have multiple tracks of workshops happening and breakouts happening and small group networking and all these different components. And then on top of that, we have the security challenges in that they're the people we're talking to are talking about, patient health information and protected data that we have to be very careful on how that is put out to the world, right? So,
Yeah.
that's my example where we are pivoting. We haven't done the event yet. It's coming up in September, but we are well on our way with the planning around that, and I think it's going to turn out great.
Awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion, and thank you so much to all of the panelists, and definitely to our guest speaker, Isaac, as well. And of course, to you, the audience, for taking the time to show up and learn and figure out how you as well can reimagine what's possible and really find those opportunities. Any other questions after the discussion today that you may have, do not hesitate to contact our friends at Heroic Productions. And I thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure.